Joining me now, very excited to say, my good friend of many, many years, state representative from Georgia, DeKalb County Democrat, former CEO of DeKalb County, Vernon Jones. Representative Vernon Jones, it's great to have you back on the John Fredericks Radio Network.
How you doing, John? I'm glad to be back on your network, and obviously I always enjoy talking to your listeners.
Vernon Jones. So Vernon and I go back a long. You know how many years it is, Vernon. But I
Just
first
don't talk about it, John.
Vernon was the Democrat CEO of DeKalb County. That's like in Virginia. That's like
County executive.
County executive, chairman of the supervisors. And so he ran for U.S. Senate there as a Democrat. Saxby Chambliss was the incumbent who was playing footsie with a gang of aid and immigration and everything else. And Vernon Jones almost won the primary. If he did, he would have beaten Chambliss, and he would have been in the U.S. Senate today. And it would have been very, very interesting. Had he done that, I would have probably gone up there just because it's so much fun. And he's a rabble-rouser and is doing it again. So, Vernon, a lot to talk about today. First of all, I know your mom passed. And I know you and your mom were close, and I'm sorry for your loss, Vernon. I'm sorry.
Thank you, John. Thank you so much.
Okay, so let's talk about Brian Kemp blowing open the gates of freedom in Georgia, of all places. And now you guys are opening up on Monday. What do you think?
Let me tell you this. Governor Kemp is as solid as Stone Mountain. He understands health and precautions. He wants to make sure that he doesn't lose any lives, that we protect people and give them those tools and resources to help protect themselves. He's helping with first responders and the Department of Public Health, getting information out there and again, doing a really good job on curtailing this pandemic. But at the same time, he understands the economy, he understands business, he understands that people want to go back to work, that some businesses have closed and they will never open again. There are people in the restaurant industry, those workers who live on tips. They're not getting anything. Thank God a lot of us like me and you or remember our friends who work in there and giving them money just to help them get through this time. But at the same time, America knows that they cannot live on that $1,200 check for the rest of their lives for the next 4 months. Can you believe this? Over 22 million people have filed for unemployment. I don't think that's ever happened in our time. And so Brian Kemp understands the balance, like the president, striking a balance between taking caution and making sure people are safe, but at the same time putting American families back to work.
I love what Brian Kemp did. I'm going to do my show there next week. Of course, when I get there, I'm going to ask you to come on live wherever we happen to be because it's going to be so much fun. So I got to tell you, Brian Kemp, I tell you what, it took a lot of courage because, he was getting skewered on social media last night and all of the left-wing media, saying he's got the blood on his hands. But remember, Brian Kemp never closed Georgia beaches, right? Everybody else did that.
They were closed for a brief minute, then he opened them back up. And I got to tell you, nothing's been said since, initial first day or two, but now nobody's even thinking about our beaches have been opened back up. Brian, he listens to people. Yes, certainly he listens to advisors. He listens to folks in public health, like President Bush. He listens to the scientists, but he also listens to Georgians. And he understands, again, I have to go back, striking a balance. This has never happened, in our lifetime. You know that. These two, President Kemp speaking President Kemp, who knows one day, but Governor Kemp and President Trump, they have done a good job of understanding the environment. And the president understands about allowing these governments to make their own decisions. One size does not fit all. Mm-hmm. Some states it's time to open. Other states, if they don't feel like they don't want to, that's on them. But the president hadn't come down with that federal government hammer and say, you will do this, and everybody fall in line, where it's punitive. He's done it in a very moderate way, and Governor Kemp recognized that Georgians, we're resilient. He's getting those masks out there. He's getting the testing out there now, and he's getting information, educating people. People are more educated now than ever before on this pandemic. And so it's working his way through. And so I applaud him. And you talked about courage. He's not a show horse. He's a workhorse. And he's not trying to grab a headline. He's not going to be dictated by the media. He's going to do what he thinks is best for Georgians.
You're on the John Fredericks Radio Network, Trucking Truth Across America. We are with Vernon Jones. He's a Democratic state representative from Georgia in DeKalb County, represents a African American majority district that voted 74% for Hillary Clinton in 2016. Now, get this, in a I'm sorry to say that. I got to say this with a straight face, Vernon. In a grainy video, and I know you did this on purpose. If you go to Vernon Jones' Twitter, which is, what is it, at Rep Vernon Jones,
at
right?
Rep Vernon Jones, yeah.
Go to at Rep Vernon Jones. I'm going to tweet it out after this segment. In a grainy video, Vernon Jones, who was in a primary challenge with another Democrat, June 9th in Georgia, Vernon Jones endorses President Trump in a district that went for Clinton 74% and is one of the most Democrat districts in the country, let alone Georgia. Vernon Jones, you got a primary in 2 months, and you go on video and you endorse Trump. Why?
One word: results. President Trump has brought about clear and precise results. He's the only president I can recall that has done what he said he's going to do. He's addressed immigration and working harder to complete that whole, comprehensive plan that's build the wall, enforce the law, among other things. President Trump, with this economy, record low unemployment across the board, and clearly there was record low unemployment for African Americans. What he's done for the Criminal Justice Reform Act, where the previous administration, or let's say Joe Biden, who wrote the crime bill, helped shepherd it through Congress, that took away discretion from judges, and at the same time made sure that those folks' time did not fit the crime, and they spent all those years in jail because of Joe Biden, and certainly it disproportionately hurt the African American community. And another thing, we look at the president. I'm a proud graduate of North Carolina Central University, which is a historical black college. And John, right there in Virginia, you have many of them there, Hampton Institute, Norfolk State, and many of other Virginia State. Those schools were directly helped by President Trump. The previous administration cut the funding. President Trump restored the funding, and not only restored it, but he wrote it into law. And let me tell you, John, when blacks could not go to majority schools, it was those historical black colleges that provided the scholars, the doctors, the engineers, the politicians, all of those who have been achieving in subsequent life. Those were breeding grounds, and they still are breeding grounds for all students now, not just for African Americans. And so President Trump has just brought about results, and it was time to put my country before my party, and that's why I said, I didn't leave the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party left me. They got so far with this radicalization of socialism. It's just they're out of step with most American people, and it was an easy choice.
Okay, but you represent a district that won 74% for Hillary Clinton. It's a heavily Democratic district. You had a primary challenge.
I do.
The last time up, you survived it in a runoff. She's challenging you again. She's raising a ton of money. She's putting this out there, getting all money in nationally. How do you buck trend and win renomination?
Well, John, let me say this. This is where the liberal media is trying to pump up someone who's just was easy to beat. I was in a race coming back to the State House back then. There were 4 people in the race, and I got 49.9% of the vote, and then came back and defeated this person in a runoff. So my opponent was no competition. But again, the media is trying to play that up, liberal media at that. John, I represent the people of my district, and I represent a new district I'd never run in before, and they trust me over her. The county where she lived, they trust me over her. It's about people's interests, not party's interests. And this party is out of touch and out of line with the people's interests. It's not the election. That's why politicians won't say anything. They're afraid of losing their seat or saying something or a gotcha moment, and people, they're nervous, they're scared, because the only thing they want to do is get reelected, or the only thing I want to do is represent the people that elect me, and partisan politics doesn't work. That's why I gridlock right now in America, because of gridlock and putting the party before the American people. And John, I never subscribe to that, and I never will. So the people know me, and I know them, and they'll make that decision on Election Day.
Well, how do you feel about your election? I mean, coming out for Trump, coming out for, I mean, look, your primary opponent. I looked into her. She's got all the backing of the AJC and the left wing
Yeah.
media there. All the Democrats. She's very liberal. She doesn't want the state to be open. She thinks it should be closed. She likes the fact that the government, people in her district, are begging the government to send them $1,200 so they can buy food at the Family Dollar or something. I mean, that's her world, right? That's all their world. She's running against you. They're predicting she wins. How do you stave this off?
Well, John, there's going to be a reckoning, so you just stand by. I've always been one step ahead of the liberal media. That's what they can't stand about me. And so, John, stay tuned. The best is yet to come, okay, my friend?
Well, you've been fighting them for a long time. I remember in the
Yeah,
Senate race. Just to let people know, Vernon Jones ran as a Democrat for the Senate. I'm going to say 2008.
yeah.
Okay, 2008. And he won the first round of the ballot. There was a runoff with little Jimmy, somebody that was the darling of the left wing. Can't think of his name. And
Jim Martin, liberal, very liberal.
little Jimmy Martin,
Yeah,
very
yeah.
liberal. And of course, the whole media went bananas. They all attacked Vernon Jones. Martin was able to beat him, went on to get beat by Chambliss. Had Jones won that nomination, which we thought he was the favorite going in, until they dumped on him, you would have beaten Chambliss in the
As a
runoff.
matter of fact,
Yeah.
John, it's funny you said that because going into the race, it was me and three other candidates. And I got most of the votes in the primary. I got about 44%. He had about 32%. But you saw again where there was no room in the Democratic Party for independent black conservative.
Mm-hmm.
And Harry Reid and Chuck Schumer, all of them in the runoff, they just came out blasting and put all those resources in his campaign. And there was no way a liberal like that could have won in a state like Georgia. But again, that's why I said, John, the Democratic Party, they talk about the big tent, they talk about the tent of inclusion,
Doesn't
and this
exist.
and that. It existed for race, it exists for or gender or orientation, but it doesn't exist for independent thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the problem. They want African American votes, but they don't want African Americans to think independently. Mm-hmm. And so that keeps the liberals working. And so, John, let me tell you, I know that, all they did when I left the plantation, they sent the bloodhounds at me, but guess what? Those bloodhounds can't catch me, John. I'm a free, independent thinker and always will be that, and you know that too.
Well, that's what drives the Democrats bananas. And if you go back to their race in 2008 and, history, you got to go back and understand history, because I've always said history is your best predictor of the future and what will happen. You go back to that race that Vernon Jones had in the runoff against Jimmy Martin. Jones, every single poll in Georgia, Jones was ahead of the Republican incumbent Chambliss in that runoff. He was ahead of him. And so if they nominate Vernon Jones, a Democrat wins that seat, beats Chambliss. He was very vulnerable on immigration and other things.
Yes.
Martin was far behind. But they dumped Martin in there. They didn't care about winning the seat. They just didn't want Vernon Jones in the U.S. Senate with a D by his name, because you were not going to follow the line.
But
you were going to be an independent thinker.
Here's ironic, John, and this shows you the discrimination, if you will, within the Democratic Party. Zell Miller, a Democrat, conservative, always been. Not only did he endorse President Bush, but he spoke at a Republican convention. Mm-hmm. Not a peep from the Democratic Party. They weren't talking about ousting him. They weren't talking about he doesn't represent the Democratic values. But here I do it now, and then you think I shot someone. Mm-hmm. But that just goes to show you that, again, there's no room in the Democratic Party for an independent thinker, especially specifically African American. I tell you, there's no room in the Democratic Party for conservative white men either. Not just black men, but white men. And that you look at most of the Georgia or most of the southern states where you see the legislatures, white Democrats almost extinct, especially the ones that are more so the ones that are conservative. And so it's John, you know, and I know it, American people know it, but we're going to keep pushing our message. I want President Trump to get reelected. He has brought about change. He will get us through this pandemic crisis. He will continue to make America great and even greater. And so that's where my focus is. My focus is waking up African Americans, saying, listen, Trump said it best, what do you have to lose? Now, he's done more in the past 3.5 years than any Democrat has in the past 60 years. So and that's what the white liberals are afraid of, John. They're afraid of blacks waking up, coming back home to the Republican Party, which is who? The party of Lincoln, not the party of Andrew Johnson, who succeeded Lincoln and started to try to reinstitute literally slavery all over again. So you and I both know this, John. Georgians want to go back to work right now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
America wants to go back to work. I see the media attacking those protesters who are saying, hey, we want to go back to work. Michigan went too extreme. You want to arrest a person who's in a boat by himself in a lake. Mm-hmm. You want to arrest a father with his wife and daughter playing catch in a park. Mm-hmm. One other place, that's too far. It's too extreme. Mm-hmm. And American people are starting to rebel against that. And President Trump feels them. He knows what they feel. He knows the American people want to go back to work. So I trust President Trump, all of his handling during this particular crisis, and Governor Kemp, and many other good governors who are running this country. So, John, I appreciate what you do, getting the word out, fighting that left-wing media group. If you listen to CNN, or let's say Hillary CNN, if you listen to those liberal networks, you think that President Trump is some horrible man. So to have stations like yours and others balancing out and getting the word out, getting the facts out, makes a difference.
John Fredericks Radio Network. We're with Democrat State Representative in Georgia, Vernon Jones, former county executive. DeKalb County represents a very Democratic area, has endorsed Governor Brian Kemp's edict to open business back up in Georgia. He's also, in a video put out Monday, a grainy video, by the way, endorsing, which I thought was part of the mystique of it. That's why you got to go to, if you're on Twitter, go to @Rep Vernon Jones. I also tweeted it out. Watch that video. So let me just ask you this. I mean, 74% of your district voted for Clinton. You have a majority district.
Yeah.
When you talk to your African-American constituents about your endorsement of Trump, what do they say?
Well, John, let me tell you, I have a significant amount. Don't forget the other 30% of whites in my district. I represent them too, and they appreciate and value what I do. So I don't represent based on race. My district happened to be of that makeup. But when I talk to people one-on-one, people know me. I'm the same person who fought for them before I decided to endorse President Trump. I'm the same person afterwards. You remember the great Hosea Williams, who was unbought and unbossed. Mm-hmm. He bucked his party and endorsed President Reagan back then. And so those of us who unbossed and unbought, we don't have a problem stepping out and let the elections take care of themselves. I can tell you this. There's a lot of pressure. It's already started with the liberal media, AJC and others, trying to paint this picture, trying to attack Vernon Jones so they won't come out and vote for me so I can be defeated. But, John, I can tell you this. I've suffered defeats, but I've never been defeated. Mm-hmm. And so we're not concerned about our district and what it is. Fact of it is, when I talk to people individually, and it's ironic, I'll say this. It's almost like whites want to say they support Donald Trump, but they don't want to be called a racist, so they don't say anything. Mm-hmm. Blacks want to support Donald Trump, but they don't want to say they've changed parties. They're Republicans. But when they go to the polls, they'll make that decision. So I don't believe these polls. I don't believe anything until the day of the election. But the election on June 9th was interesting. What I find of interest for me is to continue to represent the people that elected me to be there. I've established track record. I've cut taxes. I have invested in infrastructure. I've commanded a large police department. We're strong in public safety. At the same time, environment, I have a record of bringing about recycling and capturing methane gas and turning it back into cash. I have a solid record of working and preserving green space, over 5,000 acres of land. I've always balanced the budget, managed a very large organization. My record speaks for itself. And John, we'll let the chips fall where they may. But
All right.
it wouldn't be the end of Vernon Jones. Just again, it's a new
Well, I know
chapter.
that, but we got to get you. We got to get you reelected. I've got to send you. I don't have a lot of money, but Ann just came in and said, get his website so we can send him a campaign donation. My wife just said that. Where do I go?
John, I tell you this: you can go to reelect Vernon Jones, and you'll find my page. But listen, I appreciate you, and tell Ann I appreciate her donation. But we're already winning because my message is waking people up, and it's giving those out there who want to take a stand to take a stand. There's a state representative out in Representative DeBerry out in Tennessee. You saw what the Democratic Party just did for him. He's a pastor, and he's against abortions and for school vouchers. And the Democratic Party out there right now trying to remove him from the ballot. Why? Because he's voting his conscience, because of his convictions. He's voting his constituency. And he's been a legislator over 25 years. And so, again, there are a lot of us who feeling this by the Democratic Party because the liberal wing is just afraid that African American is waking up and realizing that, wait a minute, you've been a chump. You've just been taking advantage of me. You've been a bully. You've muffled my ideas and my thoughts. And they're getting tired of it. So people like me and him are leading the way of getting people woke, as they call it. And so I appreciate all the support I've got from across this country. You mentioned that video. I had no idea. I was just letting people know that, hey, this is where I stand. And it's gotten over 1.2 million views, that little grainy video. So people are feeling what I'm feeling, and people are supportive, John.
Well, that was that is a classic video. I just retweeted it out. Hopefully, you'll get more views off it. Ann's going to send you a campaign donation as soon as we get off the air. Go to reelectvernonjones.com, reelectvernonjones.com. Vernon, thanks for being with us, man.